thank you everyone for joining. So first, wanted to thank everyone for participating and supporting the Visa Crypto product team and joining these fireside chats. And we've gotten fantastic feedback from them, and so we're looking to do more. So if you have ideas or suggestions of topics, please let us know. We'll also be recording these, and we'll be recording this today so that folks that can't join live can join after. And also wanted to make sure everyone's aware that we have a Visa Crypto Teams channel that you should definitely join as a way to get access to resources and follow what our team is doing. So we'll post that link in the chat. So I wanted to get started and first, welcome our special guest, Cleve Mesidor, who is the author of My Quest for Justice in Politics and Crypto, and the founder of the National Policy Network for Women of Color and Blockchain. So incredibly excited to have her join us here. So welcome, Cleve. And really, first off, I just wanted to say, I appreciate you and thank you for all of the work that you've done to increase, Black representation in crypto for many years now. And so it's a pleasure to be able to get to know you and figure out how we can work together to continue this mission. But we wanted to start the conversation today really with, just sharing, your story of how you got into this space. And, most people in crypto talk about this concept of, the crypto rabbit hole. And so how did you come across crypto? How did you get to it? And what made you, want to spend time in this industry?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for your leadership in this space and for, providing a platform to have this conversation, because this is an important conversation. Yeah, the space is so new that whenever I do panels, I always like to start by, the story, right? Because most people who've only heard about crypto, have only heard about Bitcoin. So they're always struck by people who have been in this space in multiple years. So for me, I'm sure you shared my bio. I have a public policy background. I worked in the Obama administration on Capitol Hill. I'm a graduate of Howard University. I have a master's in communications, and I worked in CNN's Washington bureau. So it was actually during the Obama administration in 2013, a friend who had a Bitcoin project and needed a press release and asked me to help him with the press release. Never heard of Bitcoin, looked it up. I helped him with the press release. The currency did not, excite me as much. There's this movie called Dope. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's about Bitcoin. It's really about the illicit use of Bitcoin. And it was actually a very interesting story. So I actually got a little bit more interested, but I will say what really got me down the rabbit hole was around 2015, 2016, when the conversation began to expand beyond Bitcoin, beyond the currency. And it expanded to the technology and what's possible and how you can build on it. And then you saw this conversation about intellectual property. So I saw my field, my domain actually being part of the conversation. And that actually prompted me to get involved. And at the time, I moved to New York. I was working for Mayor de Blasio at the time, and I was the First Lady's communications director. And I decided to actually focus on crypto full time and work in the space. And my first instinct was to work on Ethereum and to create a platform for activists, for disruptors, but a platform for them, a social platform for them to be themselves, right? To be social. There are so many organizing tools and ways for them to be activists. So, for me, Logos is what I call it. It would be a place where they could actually find their tribe, people who are like them, commiserate. Activists and disruptors, we lose most of the time. So that's one of the challenges, but also even find people who could date, for people who are revolutionary activists, you're already married to your cause already. So you need to be in a relationship with somebody who understands that they're going to be second. But interestingly, I loved getting immersed in the crypto ecosystem, building a network. And, I moved back to DC, 2017, 2018. And realized that the public policy piece was such a critical piece of how I could build, how innovation could move forward. And so I started working a lot with the Blockchain Association, one of the 4 groups that focus on crypto in Washington, D.C., to leverage my background in public policy. Again, I worked in the Obama administration, I worked on Capitol Hill, and use that background to start having conversations with the Tri-Caucus. The Tri-Caucus on Capitol Hill includes the Black Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, and Asian Caucus, to start to have conversations with members about this thing called financial inclusion, right? Because what we were seeing was, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, and, Facebook's, CEO coming to talk about blockchain and financial inclusion. And for members of the Tri-Caucus, they were just like, been there, done that. So we wanted members of Congress to see, innovators from their congressional districts who looked like them, who were building. So in 2019, last year, I organized the first congressional briefing of women of color in blockchain. I brought a delegation of 25 women from all over the country, and we actually met with members of the Tri-Caucus as well as, agency heads as well. It was an opportunity for these women to connect and see other women who are building in the space. And it was such a huge success that a few months later, the Small Business Committee asked me to help them find a woman of color to participate in their first congressional briefing on blockchain. So it has been great, and we're planning the next one in March 2021, where we'll bring a delegation of 100 women of color from across the space. So long-winded way to answer the question, but the rabbit hole has taken me into the enterprise development space, obviously, as a startup founder, but anchored in terms of this piece, I guess my sweet spot in terms of advocacy and inclusion, but also more importantly, equity.
That's fantastic. And so what do you think, in these conversations that you have, on the Hill, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about how crypto is either, already impacting or could impact, underserved communities?
Yeah, most people do not realize that for the Tri-Caucus, as I mentioned, the Asian Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, and the Black Caucus, those members and their staff, they primarily heard about blockchain in terms of the illicit use of crypto, right? They've heard about it being used in human trafficking, in all types of illicit use. And that's an important conversation. And the crypto community is working with global law enforcement to actually track those activities. But if that's their main starting point, how do you expand that narrative, right? Because when you look at financial inclusion and how these members have had no choice but to focus on this, right? FinTech has been part of that conversation because it has been, how do you create more options for people to have access to money and to be economically empowered? But blockchain takes things to a whole different level. And one of the barriers to having a deep dive in terms of economic empowerment and financial inclusion, especially as it relates to Black and brown people, is a lot of these members, right, they have limited staff, but they're also immersed in social issues. Right? They're already focused on healthcare and, job loss and such. So it's hard to take their attention away from these critical issues that affect their congressional districts and actually shift the focus. So I think, Kai, we talked about this, right? It's really expanding, even within the crypto space, the conversation from, just financial inclusion to economic empowerment, and to really start talking about how do we educate and train, and for the crypto community, how do we become better ambassadors, right? And dial it back a bit and start having a conversation about the basics and start talking in the language of regular people, because I love crypto. I love our narrative. I love our language. But when I talk to new people about crypto, I don't mention Satoshi Nakamoto, because that turns people off. That scares people. So there's a lot to be done in terms of that narrative, because people are skeptical on Capitol Hill about this whole financial inclusion claim.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point, and really enjoyed talking about this with you last week. Is the crypto industry, it seems, has really just we've talks about financial inclusion, and crypto is going to bank the unbanked and the underbanked. And it doesn't seem like, that has resonated that well in DC. And because there just aren't that many tangible examples of how crypto is just the solution. And so that idea of financial empowerment and thinking about this as a new asset class that's more accessible, that anyone can get easy exposure to, seems to have a lot more potential. And so kind of the asset class is one thing. What other opportunities do you think crypto and blockchain represents for Black communities and businesses when you think about, Black entrepreneurship?
Yes. So I do think when you think about Black entrepreneurship, we have to look at crypto as a technology that solves problems, right? So I try to focus on the technology that it is about solutions, right? And so if you start with what is the problem you're trying to solve, and what are the applications that crypto may offer, look to are there other solutions, right? We don't want, blockchain to be a silver bullet, because it is not a silver bullet. So we do want to start with this conversation about what is the problem, right? What are you trying to solve? Because there are instances when it can solve a problem. And also, I'm expanding your question a bit. I always like to tell people of color, especially Black and brown people, that, crypto doesn't require you to leave your space, right? There was a long time in tech, you'd have to, leave to learn how to code. And the great thing about it being a solutions-driven technology is wherever you are, whatever your domain, if you're a teacher, if you're in finance, if you're, in healthcare, right? If you understand your domain, and if you begin with how is crypto being applied to solve some of these problems, but also what are some of the problems we've had that I can actually help solve within my domain. I think for people of color, while we are entrepreneur, we don't have we're not going to take the risk of leaving whatever domain we are at. So we need early adoption. And by starting with that conversation, I'll give an example of a great project that I like to talk about. It's called Popcom. It's a startup by a Black woman, Dawn Dixon. And she's actually looking to automate vending machines, right? Pure and simple. Right? She's an entrepreneur, a small business owner. She's had 4 small businesses. So when it came to vending machines, right, she's looking at the innovation of vending machines, right? They went from where you could buy gumballs to now you can buy Louis Vuitton shoes, cannabis. And with a lot of these higher end products, there are federal regulations that require you to verify identity or verify information and do it securely. And so Dawn is uniquely leveraging blockchain technology for that specific problem, right? So she's an entrepreneur, she has her small business, but the biggest issue she had was meeting federal requirements and securely verifying information, and blockchain allowed her to solve that. So I do think, if we, again, go back to basic conversations in crypto right now, I think there's so much focus on financial instruments. So as a result, the developer community is a big priority, right? How do we create, products for Bitcoin? How do we create products for investors? So developers are very critical, but we know that the marketplace, the micro enterprises that are really driving this 4th industrial revolution, that are really going to be critical to the innovation economy, are going to be small enterprises who are going to be leveraging blockchain, AI, VR, robotics to actually solve problems and bring viable products to the marketplace. So, so there's lots of examples, but my recommendation would be that we need to shift focus from just financial instruments or just store value, and start looking at how are micro enterprises, which are really going to drive the economy, leveraging technology. And obviously that's Visa's sweet spots, right? So many of these micro enterprises, they leverage their relationship with their credit card company or their financial institutions to do just that. And oftentimes your financial institution is no longer a bank anymore. It could be your credit card company or your fintech partner.
Yeah, this is a fantastic example. And I think the kind of notion of blockchain as a general purpose technology that small businesses and entrepreneurs can take advantage of is just so much bigger than thinking about, just Bitcoin as one asset. But when we bring this back to, thinking about, financial services and, Black and minority owned financial services, one of the things that's really resonated with me is, you have Black community banks that have been around for many years, and it's been very hard for them to be able to survive. Being any community bank, it's hard to survive these days. And so I feel like there's a lot of focus on how do we just help old Black community banks that have been around rather than how do we start 1,000 new Black community banks. And so it seems like crypto could be this general purpose technology that can lower the barrier to entry to build financial services, which wasn't really accessible before. And so are you seeing, Black entrepreneurs, also starting to leverage this as, how to build a financial service that it was not, you weren't able to do if you had to go get a bank charter, but now you can do using blockchain as a technology?
Yes. And it's interesting. I was talking to a friend this week, actually, and he's a lobbyist in Washington, and a lot of his clients are Black community banks or fintech companies led by people of color. And he made the point that, for traditional Black banks, they want access to the technology. They don't want regulations that make it harder for them. And even, new fintech companies or even folks who are looking into, the financial services space or looking to build financial instruments, the barrier that we're creating is this whole having to register as, get a bank charter or these regulations. So you're right in terms of if we go back to this whole community bank, and we're doing it for everything, like community healthcare centers. If we go back to that premise of, these anchors in our communities, cryptocurrency offers an opportunity for entrepreneurs to be those anchors without all of these regulations and for us to move away from a traditional financial system that is anchored in consumerism, right? Meeting the consumer where they're at. So that is a great opportunity for urban America, Black and brown communities where people can be empowered to actually create, financial institutions that are micro and small that meet specific needs, and even do that in partnership with organizations like Visa and others who can actually be strong allies in those communities.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to shift a bit to this strange year that is, 2020. So curious, just from your lens and perspective, how has, COVID and the pandemic impacted both crypto and, Black small businesses, and kind of what challenges have you seen small businesses face with the PPP program? And I thought you had some fascinating examples of just kind of your observations of what's happened this year.
Yeah. Oh my God. COVID has been so devastating, right? And we don't even know the extent of the devastations yet, but one of the things that COVID exposed is so much of our structures, systems, were really being held together by chewing gum, right? So much, when you even look at, the impact of COVID on, people of color, Black and Hispanic communities in terms of health outcomes have been terrible. But one of the things that has been looked at, I know Brookings Institute, McKinsey, even the UN Women have done reports about how COVID has impacted working women, professional women, eroded a lot of the workforce advances we've done and taking us so far backwards, right? In terms of, the jobs that women had that went away during COVID, or even in some cases, professional women having to go back home because you don't have babysitters or options to take people out of their home. So I would say, every community has been impacted, but when you look at women, regardless of racial identity, the greatest impact has been on women, and obviously globally, women of color have suffered the most. And again, there's great studies by, again, McKinsey, Brookings Institute, that starts to show some of these numbers, but we still don't have a way to tell that. And small businesses have been hurt so much. I'm a small business myself. In my book, I talk about my experience with the PPP loan program. That there's a saying that the road to hell is paved with with intentions. The PPP loan program was a great example of that, right? It started as an idea of how do you help struggling small businesses and even help the gig economy. It is independent contractors that actually are being impacted. What wasn't factored in is that, discrimination is and a lack of equity is embedded into our laws and into our systems. And until we address that, we're still going to keep getting the same outcomes, right? Because we're still using the same old data sets. We're still using the same systems that have barriers of entry. So as a result, we know that the PPP loan program primarily went to wealthy businesses, wealthy individuals, because we didn't look to solve the problems yet. Even myself, I applied for a PPP loan and I got a $20,000 PPP loan and had to jump through hoops for that. And I just discussed that in the book. While, so many, financial organizations, were able to just get millions and millions of dollars. And the point is not, we can always say the system sucks and it sucks, it's always going to suck, right? But it's how do we make it better? How do we make better decisions? And as you look at this new administration that's coming in of the Biden administration, or even globally, as central banks and, the G7 the IMF had to think about how we get the global economy back on track. I was talking to another friend this week, and we were talking about how, this decade, this is 2020, this decade is going to be the decade of the woman, especially the decade of, the professional woman, whether she's a small business owner, an executive, or, she's in college, about to graduate. Well, really, this is a pivotal time for how we figure out how to empower and position women for success.
It's a fantastic point. It seems like that the notion of kind of what is a small business and what do they look like, there's still the perception of just, it's a brick and mortar, business that someone walks into. And then when you have these dramatic shifts, like COVID, it's, how do you help entrepreneurs start online businesses? And so I feel like companies like Shopify and making it easier to sell online, and then, technologies like blockchain make it easier to build new small businesses. Have you found that, the women entrepreneurs that you work with have struggled kind of getting their businesses considered as that small business that should be supported, while, other more traditional small businesses are, even though you could argue like, those are what the future small businesses look like that we really need to support and help get off the ground? Yes.
No, absolutely. Women of color access to capital, access to funding is very difficult, right? It's very hard for them to access VC funding. They don't have the traditional financial institutions necessarily, relationships with the financial institutions, or some of the, traditional infrastructure or documentation that VCs will need. But it goes even deeper than that, right? One of the things last year I tried to do on Capitol Hill was, after that hearing I mentioned with the Small Business Administration, I met with the team of the House Small Business Committee. Nydia Velasquez as the chair. I met with her team to pitch a piece of legislation that would direct the Small Business Administration to expand the 7A loan program, right? We know that the, SBA 7A loan program is great. How do we expand that to actually have an innovation component where they could have a pilot where, micro enterprises, small operators could actually be qualified to access a special 7A loan program? Because what we have, and one of the things we talked about, we have to redefine that definition, right? Because more and more micro enterprises don't have a traditional relationship with a bank, right? They're actually using PayPal or, their Visa credit card. So it was interesting. The committee was all for it. They want to innovate the 7A loan. In fact, they've said that they've wanted to do that. The biggest barrier to that has been an association that's been, is essentially protecting the 7A loan program. For most banks, the 7A loan program is so small that they they defer to this association to, really negotiate the terms with the Small Business Administration. But they're very threatened by this whole innovation, right? Why should all of a sudden, people in cryptocurrency and AI and robotics get all this funding when their traditional mom and pop, brick and mortar organizations might be threatened, right? So for me, it was the committee's all for, the small business committee is all for moving this legislation, but Cleve, you have to go convince this group. And you know what? I had to actually do that during the Obama administration. We came in, President Obama inherited a financial crisis. We had to create jobs. We had the brilliant idea how to integrate innovation and entrepreneurship into the economic development mix. I was at the Economic Development Administration. That was our whole focus, to create jobs. So we started introducing it because we worked with counties and governors and mayors and their economic team, and they were just like, hell no. And we're just like, wait, how could you actually be against innovation and entrepreneurship? We took it for granted that this was just a good thing, right? Because for them, they're smart enough because they're in their counties, they're in their, in their states, and they need resources, and they know how government works. Government works with pockets of money, right? There's a pocket of money for bricks and mortar, pockets of money for technical assistance. So if you're going to introduce innovation and entrepreneurship, where's that packet of money? So we realized that we can't just come to them with a new tool. We have to say, here's the funding. It took us a year to understand that, but we got the funding, and we actually started to get them to integrate, entrepreneurship and innovation. And we started looking at, tech transfer and universities and the role that they can play, and started having a conversation about how it can help them attract foreign direct investment. So as we go into this fourth industrial revolution, we have to redefine small business. They're going to be more innovative. We have to, make room in our traditional systems, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be very difficult. We made small steps during the Obama administration, and it wasn't until years after that, one of the things during the Obama administration, the Bush administration had, stopped the space program. So for the Obama administration, we had to retool a whole section of our workforce to actually figure out how do we use all of these assets and resources and the knowledge base that people have outside of the space program. And, we looked at advanced manufacturing and such, but it took a decade. We're actually seeing, SpaceX was one of the investments President Obama made that we worked with him at Commerce. It took a while to see these things grow. So, we have to be willing to plant seeds, and cryptocurrency and blockchain is part of the seed. And, in order for us to do that, just like I experienced with the Obama administration, we cannot take education for granted. We have to have the conversations, and we have to understand how it fits into the lives of, or the processes of people.
It's an amazing parallel, just thinking about the, getting space programs off the ground, like new crazy moonshot innovative technologies, and now crypto and blockchain, you need similar public-private partnerships to actually be able to grow them. So I wanted to shift a little bit to, crypto as an asset class, and, thinking about, racial wealth disparities, and, Bitcoin just hit an all-time high today, over $20,000. The crypto industry is celebrating. But what do you think are the biggest barriers to Black participation and ownership of crypto? And how do you think about crypto as an asset class and racial wealth disparities?
Yes. As a person who owns Bitcoin, I'm ecstatic. But as a person who is in crypto, one of the biggest barriers to crypto, and especially for Black and brown communities, is Bitcoin, right? We cannot make the case that crypto is for everyone where Bitcoin is over $20,000, right? That's very difficult. And that actually, when you look at, the white paper in 2008, it was to create a cashless payment system that was supposed to be a payment system, right? So while I'm thrilled about, the price of Bitcoin, I do think we have to change the narrative away from, Bitcoin, right? And it's a success. And quite frankly, in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space, Bitcoin is the only success we've had, right? Everything else is in beta, even, with distributed ledgers and smart contracts where and supply chain. But Bitcoin has been this great success. So I would say for Black and Brown communities, whether we're trying to, outreach to small businesses or even some players to get in, I do think that, we have to take the focus away from the anomaly that is Bitcoin, but also, to have these conversations around the opportunity to be your own bank, to actually, be able to create financial services for your community because you can solve those problems, but also shift focus to some of the successes we've had with other currencies, right? And even with stable coins. Because you in your op-ed, you talked about how, crypto is three things, right? It's an industry, it's a technology, it's an asset class, but you can't have those conversations with every community, right? So going back to my communications background is who's your audience, right? And how do you have that conversation with them? Because I do think that we should absolutely be having this conversation about new asset class with communities of color, especially, with young people. I use young loosely, under 50. I do think Gen Xers in their 40s and 50s have a lot of money to spend. I'm a Gen Xer. So we have to have this conversation, but we have to have a different conversation. There are so many barriers because even with, when I try not to invite people to blockchain conferences or blockchain panels because they tend to have all of these conversations about, protocols and, all of these conversations, in my opinion, are intended to be barriers, right? They keep people out. So I do think, in terms of having a financial conversation with people, when you look at people under 25 and Zoomers, especially the people in college or in high school, they use Robinhood all the time and PayPal because their relationship with investment is different. It's not as traditional and purist as some of us older people, right? So investments are part of their natural relationship with money. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I do think as we look at new asset class, we have to have a different conversations as we're targeting new consumers and as we're looking at how to approach them. On crypto Twitter, I don't get excited when the queen is looking at crypto or when a celebrity is looking at crypto. I tweet all the time. I'm more excited when people I went to high school with who are not in any type of innovative space text me and say, hey, tell me about this thing called Bitcoin. I get on the phone with them right away because if any business right now that's going to survive, including crypto, we have to look at the marketplace and we have to look at where the marketplace is trending. And I'll be honest that right now, the ecosystem, the crypto ecosystem, we've done a poor job in terms of not just reflecting diversity in crypto, but also reflecting, the priorities and needs of new investors to money or new investors who want options in money.
Mm. Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation, and I feel like looking at Bitcoin in relation to other financial assets, one of the things that really stood out for me is that for me personally, Bitcoin was a growth hack for financial literacy. Like I graduated college, I didn't know what a central bank was. I couldn't really explain how inflation worked. And I feel like particularly for this younger generation that, they're getting into investing, they're getting onto Robinhood and they're starting to buy stocks, just to ask someone like, let me explain to you what Bitcoin is easier to explain than let me just tell you what inflation is. And to understand Bitcoin, you have to understand it in relation to the broader financial system and in relation to other assets. And I think that there are a lot of lessons that can be taught there. And then I think, it's also interesting to think of like, what are investments with asymmetric returns and who has access to those?
Yeah.
And so, there's a comparison of, who can invest in a Series A or seed stage stock or seed stage equity of a high growth startup not many people can, but being able to fractionally buy, so some post in the chat, like you can buy $10 of Bitcoin on Cash App, and that has had asymmetric venture-like returns over the last 5 years. And so it does seem like it has brought the barrier to entry, but it's important to understand it in the context of a broader portfolio, in the context of how different asset classes work. So I guess, how do you think about the kind of unique connection between Black communities and ownership? You mentioned being your own bank, and we were talking the other day about like the emotional nature of Black people buying a home and like accomplishing the American dream. So how do you see kind of this nature of ownership evolving as crypto creates these new forms of ownership?
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I do think that, Black and brown people are natural entrepreneurs, right? And oftentimes because we've had to be, right? Because the access to a lot of opportunity were denied to us. So, but there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and being innovative, right? Because innovation is where the risk takes place. So being an entrepreneur is you actually are able to have a hustle, make things happen. But the innovation piece is how much risk are you willing to take? So when it comes to this whole concept about ownership and, Black communities, it's a conversation that the Black community has been having and continues to have. Is how do we create wealth, and how do we create generational wealth, and how do we actually create products that we can own and not just be consumers. Now, one of the things that we talked about, just going back a little bit about, we definitely should be leveraging our financial literacy centers. That's one of the projects I'm working on in terms of how do financial literacy centers exist all across America. And they're already teaching people about the difference between paying for that banana with a check or cash or credit card, right? We should be adding cryptocurrency to the mix so that people learn about it and don't lose their money. But I do think that there's an appetite for ownership in Black and brown communities that is ripe for financial services. Right. So when you look at the PPP loan, when it fell apart, a lot of Black and brown celebrities stepped in and gave micro loans to small businesses to help them to prosper during the time during during COVID. But also, I do think you see that people of color are really concerned about how do you create wealth in your own business, but also making sure that it's profitable. And that is where companies like Visa can come into play in terms of creating access to capital, creating small grant programs so that you can create wealth. Home ownership is something that we have to think about, right? Because we see that there's a lot of blight where millennials and even Zoomers are not thinking about buying homes, right? They're going to inherit their homes of their parents. But people, especially people of color, want to create businesses that are viable that they can pass on to their children. And again, that goes back to this whole concept of how do we actually redefine micro enterprises? How do we ensure that they prosper? And how do we ensure that they become the new engine of the American economy, the way that traditional small businesses were? So ownership is very, very important, but it's how we define it that's going to be.
And it seems like there's also cryptos expanding in terms of new types of things that you can own. And so would love to get your perspective on like, what are NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and why should anyone here, care about what an NFT is?
Oh my God, yes. So I'm not sure if anyone will care yet, because it is about, NFTs are about creatives, like art, and they're non-tangible, right? Because you don't have anything physical. So it goes back to this whole concept of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is wealth that you're never going to physically own. So an NFT is a non-fungible token. The most famous ones are CryptoKitties. They were created, a few years ago when, on the Ethereum blockchain, when people thought, okay, and a CryptoKitty was like $1,000 for a CryptoKitty, and what it was is a digital cat that each one is unique, and people were paying a minimum of $10,000 for. Something that was a novelty blew up. The CryptoKitty industry, who knew people wanted to spend $10,000 on a unique cat that they were never going to see, but they owned that NFT. So that actually led this space to explode to the point that, you have seen, people want commemorative NFTs for an event, like a conference, right? So for a lot of people, this is your way of all your attendees getting an NFT. So this would be their first, crypto item that they get. So there's a way for them to download it, that they own it. It's unique to them. And then you've now seen it even go into art, where people are actually creating art on, that is, for the most part, an NFT where somebody can own it. And again, it's something unique to you. So the space is exploding because there's so much possibilities to it in terms of creating, either commemorative items that people can share, but also its growth in terms of the art and creative community. But it is hard for people to grasp, right? Because anything commemorative, people want something physical. But again, I think, with the CryptoKitty phase, we saw that people want unique, right? It's just like that collectible baseball card back in the day where it was, oh my God, you own this and it's unique. Or even with comic books, it's the same concept. It's just, on a blockchain. Yeah.
This idea of the digital collectible is just, it's such a fascinating thing, and that as a way that people can express themselves, that, you could have an asset that represents events that you went to, all these fascinating things that are happening. And I feel like it expands what crypto is beyond just money, beyond just payments, and creates this new asset class. And like bringing this back to policy, right now there's this debate over, a non-custodial unhosted wallet. And the idea of, should you or should you not be able to use a wallet where you control your own keys? And digital collectibles are just this one market where there are Black artists that are creating art using, a private key that they're controlling in a non-custodial wallet. And so if you want to ban non-custodial wallets, you're also taking away a new platform that artists are using. So would love your thoughts on what is a non-custodial wallet? Why does it matter in this broader conversation around financial empowerment?
Well, I think the policy piece you brought to it is the most important piece, right? Because it's all about how do we regulate things, and it's hard to regulate what you don't understand. And I will say, quite frankly, I don't know if we've done a good enough job to, to explain the difference between a public blockchain and a private blockchain, let alone the difference between, these different types of wallets. So I would say that all of these things represent tremendous opportunity, but we have to explain them in such a way that, we explain the opportunity, because, there's tremendous opportunity. One of the biggest quotes that I love is one person, when they were testifying, said that innovators think big, but legislators and regulators have to anticipate what might go wrong, right? So within crypto, there's so much. It's like going to a candy store, right? There's so much for everybody to to leverage, to actually innovate. But we have to start in doing the basics of actually just explaining the difference between some of these assets or applications within crypto. Because the further we go along in terms of we need this, even the whole Stable Act, the stablecoin bill, like the space is the crypto space is moving forward quicker than policy and even consumers can keep up, and that's a detriment to crypto, right? Because we can't move without the marketplace. We also cannot move without proper regulations, and regulators who are primarily over 60, their radar is going to go up, instantly and quickly. So I do think, as we actually, in the financial services sector, right, before crypto, fintech has spent a lot of time trying to make some of these inroads. And so we, how we get there is we have a savvy marketplace, and we have an unsavvy, group cadre of legislators. But we have to move forward. How do we do it? And for those of us who are over 40, the people under 40, they're going to take it over regardless, right? They're going to change the world. For them, cryptocurrency makes more sense when you explain it to them than the traditional financial system. But we have an economic responsibility now. So I would say that's the biggest challenge to a lot of these issues that, companies like Visa or even small operators like microenterprises who are looking to build and actually, expand financial services. Is this whole education piece. It sounds silly, but we have to do it, and we can't take it for granted because it's going to keep biting us.
In touching on education, and if folks have questions, please start putting it in the channel, and want to make sure we have time to get your questions to Cleve. But I wanted to touch on education. What's going on around HBCUs and crypto, and kind of some of the activity that you're seeing? You're a Howard alum. What's happening at Howard? Like, what can Visa do to help and support, and kind of where's the activity there?
So I would say, HBCUs have done a great job over the last decade or two to create a pipeline, right? To focus on STEM, to focus on tech, to train this next generation of, innovators of color. And it's not just HBCUs, right? There are University of Miami has a large Latino population. And so when you look at, universities across the nation that have, large concentrations of key demographics of people of color, they have done their due diligence to create a pipeline, and now we have to create opportunity for them. One of the biggest problems we have, especially for HBCUs or these universities, is our instinct with diversity, right? Crypto is famous for this, right? During conference season, right? There'll be 5 conferences happening like within a month, right? And each of them will have the same one Black person that speaks with everyone. It's like, oh, how can we just recycle? We do that the same with HBCUs as well, right? There's a lot of, talent out there. There's a lot of universities that should be leveraged and have specialties in a lot of these innovative areas. But what we've seen is Morgan State, in Maryland has a lot of, and they deserve it, and Ripple deserves a lot of credit. So about a year and a half, 2 years ago, Ripple created a university program. Morgan State was one of them. But before that, they had created a concentration on research and innovation, worked with Google and others. So Morgan State, in terms of when you're looking at HBCUs that have done a lot, especially in crypto, but also in a lot of AI and robotics and stuff, they've done a great job. I'm a Howard alumni, proud Howard alumni. We've done a lot, but we're not there. We have some work to do. So we've made some inroads in terms of the blockchain program, but we definitely need some more support, and we also need to redefine our role. I do think that for Howard being in DC, our hospital and our radio and TV stations became such a critical part of it, so that those of us who are Howard alumni are actually working with the university to really, and the engineering school. The goal is really to look at how the engineering school, the business school, and the law school can actually work together to actually help to strengthen the crypto program there. But that said, though, when you hear about the conversations within crypto, they don't expand beyond there, and that's a detriment, right? Because there are dozens of HBCUs out there. They offer different areas in terms of curriculum, and they definitely need partnerships, because if the industry, regardless of the industry, doesn't understand the pipeline being created at these universities, doesn't understand the investment in the curriculum and the disciplines that they can provide, you're never going to create opportunity for these Black and brown innovators. They're going to come in and have a hard time. They're going to graduate and have a hard time finding jobs, which would be a huge detriment. Mm-hmm. And so again, I keep mentioning, going back to the basics, internship programs are so critical. People think, oh, that's nothing, but even Visa, if any company, but if you look at your interns, they all look the same. They all come from the same schools because of economic opportunity. When I worked on Capitol Hill, we had a hard time as alums getting internships, interns from Howard University and Howard was actually based there because it's a lot of money to intern on Capitol Hill. Like you have to have housing, find housing. It's actually something that's easier for children of wealthy parents to do. And so we have to rethink all of these things in terms of how we actually leverage this incredible pipeline that's available to all industries to better reflect the marketplace, but also to actually tap the incredible talent that's out there as we move forward. So, as a Howard alumni, we definitely want to work forward, but I celebrate Morgan and Bowie State also is, doing some great things in this region. Obviously, I'm in DC, so my sister's a Hampton alumni. They actually have the largest endowment of any HBCU. but yeah, I can't speak enough about them. But I would say, HBCU for most people is the buzzword, and it has to go beyond that. We really have to really look at how to, and I know I've gone on, but during the Obama administration, one of the things that we sought to do was to make community colleges more attractive, because not everybody's going to go to a four-year school, right? And so when you look at rural communities and economically disadvantaged communities, so the goal wasn't just to how do you make community colleges more attractive, but how do you get industry partners in the conversation about what are the curriculums that would make sense for them to hire from a 2-year school, and even work with some of these, 4-year institutions to say what are some of the requirements they would need to be able to, for Harvard or University of Pennsylvania to say, I'm going to accept students with a 2-year education. So we approached it that way in terms of public-private partnership, right? So it was about how do we, and I think today, so we have some strong community colleges that have strong curriculums that have industry partners, and that's going to be critical. Even my relatives, when they call me about my cousins, they send them to college, I'm like, no, send them to a community college, let them earn it, and then send them to, Barnard or Cornell or NYU.
That's great. So I want to get a few questions from the audience here. So let's start with what 3 things would you advise for over 50 folks who want to learn about cryptocurrency? You talked about it kind of being generational, and what have you seen in perceptions of different generations and how to learn about it?
Yes. Well, the first thing I would tell you is I may look young, but I'm 47. So I am hitting on 50.
I don't think it was implied.
But I would say for anybody who is, over 40, but definitely over 50, you have the edge. I think it was MIT did a study recently that the average age of an entrepreneur is 45. That the average age of a successful entrepreneur is 45. Right. So I would go back to, if you're 50 or over, are interested in, crypto or any of these innovative places, look at how they're impacting your domain, your industry. Believe it or not, that's the best way to learn about crypto, right? So I have a friend who's an accountant. So I spent a few months just sending her, how Ernst & Young and others are leveraging cryptocurrency, because she's an accountant at Johnson & Johnson. So this way, she was able to see how they're adapting it. So she was then now able to suggest to her team training programs that they could have, and even look at how could they leverage blockchain within her work streams, right? Then it did not require for her to leave her space or do anything, but it was just a conversation about, again, I had the resources learning about how is it affecting accounting as a whole. So again, do not leave your space. Don't start focusing on areas that are outside of your knowledge base, but focus on your domain, your specific area. How is crypto in this conversation impacting it? And the great thing about the crypto space is in its infancy. Anybody who reaches out to anybody in crypto and asks a question, they'll answer you. This is one of those times if you reach out to a CEO of any crypto company, because everybody's trying to evangelize, trying to get people to this space. So this is the perfect time if, you want to have conversational meetings with some of the, folks you see on Twitter, some of the folks who are doing stuff on their work. People in crypto love to talk about it and love to, I would say don't do YouTube videos because they take you down a rabbit hole that may not be where you need to be. A book that is, that's a good place for people to start is called The Internet of Money. It's a great space. Great book that actually talks about the space and how its evolution. And one case study I would share for people to look at. This is not crypto, it's digital currency, but it's a great case study for this escalation towards crypto. In Kenya, there's a digital currency called M-Pesa. M like Mary, P-E-S-A. M-Pesa is a great success of the Central Bank of Kenya worked with industry leaders in the communities to create a digital currency that is credible, that is accepted, that is being used, that is in circulation, that is solving problems. Chris Brummer from Georgetown University had a FinTech conference in October, and he actually did an interview with the head of the Central Bank of Kenya. And if you can take a look at that, I'll send you the link, Kai, if you could share with people. It's just that evolution towards cryptocurrency, the Internet of Money helps. It's a great book to show you how to do that. But M-Pesa is a great case study.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And I love that you gave the unwritten rule of learning about crypto. Crypto Twitter good, crypto YouTube bad. Stay off crypto YouTube. Telling you right now, it'll lead you to places that you don't want to go. So I think we have time for one more question. I want to make sure we respect your time. Thank you for being so generous already. So what are your thoughts on crowdfunding using crypto and tokens? And we talked about kind of the challenge of minority entrepreneurs kind of raising money from VCs. Is that the future of crowdfunding with tokens instead? Yeah,
so the SEC has actually loosened a lot of rules that have made crowdfunding possible. So the SEC actually recently expanded the rules so that entrepreneurs can actually raise, it used to be $1 million, I think it's up to $5 million now using crowdfunding. And again, the previous barriers where, it was traditional investors that could actually invest in, new products or startups. So I do think that crowdfunding is a space that's expanding. The Popcom, which I mentioned to you, Dawn Dixon, she has definitely been leveraging crowdfunding in a way and really monitoring how the SEC rules have been changing. And during COVID, she actually raised like $2 million based on that, because I think the threshold is each investor can, $250 is the largest each individual investor could make, but tapping her network and really, I invested and then I shared it with my network. So crowdfunding is a great way for micro enterprises to actually raise funds, but there's been a lot of loosening of the regulations where there's a lot more opportunity than there used to be.
And it seems like there was ICOs, initial coin offerings that raised a lot of money, but then they were kind of unregistered securities. And then there's traditional crowdfunding, and then there are kind of security token raises in the middle. And so it's clear that there is evolution in capital formation with more options than there were before. And that seems like a positive thing for underrepresented entrepreneurs that have more access to capital to get started. So I think we've got 1 minute. Anything else that you wanted to share with the group before you go? But I wanted to personally thank you. Everything that you're doing in the space. I'm excited to figure out how we can work together, how Visa can help. And it's such an important issue, and really appreciate you spending the time.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I love having this conversation. I think it's great that Visa is getting into this space. And I would definitely recommend for, your team, Kai, to really look at, the Visa ecosystem, the Visa networks, because you have some of your, patrons and partners who are already leveraging crypto. One of the successful things I've seen in the crypto community that's been successful is, to to celebrate Cree people. Like during Women's History Month, Gemini, I don't have a relationship with them, reached out to me and said, hey, we wanted to profile you for Women's History Month. And I was like, okay, I didn't have a relationship with the Winklevoss twins, but it started a relationship. They did a profile, they emailed me some information, and and I've been able to reach out to them for the March Women of Color and Black Chain briefing, and they're looking at being a sponsor. So I do think promoting some of the people in your ecosystem that are doing great things, and also really looking at some people who are doing it at the micro level, because again, and even within Visa, because most people who are looking to get into this space, they want people who look like them or who have the same story to know how they got in there. So whether that person exists at a company already, or if somebody is in the space, we don't tell these stories enough so that people can see, oh, this person was, in the, in this department at this company and started this. I could do that in mine as well. So we can all be better ambassadors. But thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll definitely do more of these and we'll have to bring it back.